To introduce the idea of percent increase and decrease, I wanted to share with you that sometimes when I'm listening to the news, I'll hear something like, the Dow Jones Industrial Average went up 110 points today. And when I hear that, I just find it completely useless because I have no idea how big the Dow Jones Industrial Average is. Is 110 points a massive, shocking increase, or is it inconsequential? So if the Dow Jones Industrial was at 200 and it went up to 310 points, that would be a really big increase. But the reality, when I looked it up today, was that it was at 33,130 points and it went up to 33,240 points. So yes, it went up 110 points, but that's not that big of an increase. It's still pretty much at the same level that it was before. So percent increase allows us to compare the amount of increase to the original amount. When I pulled up this website about the Dow Jones Industrial Average, this is what it was showing. Yes, it went up 110 points. And then here it shows 0.33%. So that's the relative increase. And if something goes up by 0.33%, that's not a very big increase. So that's what we will be learning about today. And another example that hopefully you can relate to is, what if somebody said they were getting a $5 an hour raise? Does that sound like a big deal? I imagine that many of you, if your boss said you were going to get $5 more every hour, that would be a fairly joyful moment. You'd be pretty excited about that. So for whom would that not be a big deal? Big deal or not a big deal? That's what I'm getting you to reflect on. Is there anybody who would just be relatively unfazed by a $5 an hour raise? So it depends on what your original wage is. If you were making minimum wage, $13.50 an hour, then that would be a pretty big deal. If you're making $75 an hour and you go up to $80 an hour, it's still good, but it's not as dramatic of a change for you. So sometimes knowing the amount of a change isn't enough information. We need to know the magnitude of the change relative to the original amount. This is when we use percent increase and decrease to describe the change. So in this box, percent change is the amount of change divided by the original amount, or the starting value. So you're going to start by doing a subtraction. You're going to subtract final value minus starting value, and then you divide by the starting value. And I'll just point out that when we did rate of change earlier in the term, we did amount of change divided by amount of time. And that's a different way of describing change. That still should be in your toolbox, but this time we're taking the amount of change divided by the original amount, and that allows us to get a percent increase. So my next example, let's say a cashier's hourly rate goes from $10 an hour to $15 an hour. The percent increase is the amount of change over the original amount. So here is 15 minus 10, means that the amount of change is a $5 an hour raise, and then we divide by $10 because that's the original pay rate. So 5 over 10 gives me 0.5, and I'm showing all the steps here. 0.5 over 1, scale top and bottom by 100. 50 out of 100 means that it's a 50% raise. That's a pretty awesome raise. Have any of you gotten a raise lately? And if so, do you know what percent increase it was? I'd be surprised if any of you have gotten a 50% raise recently. That seems like it would be a pretty big deal. Now let's look at this example of a lawyer. If their hourly rate goes from 200 to 205, what percent raise would that be? So you should try to work that one out and see. It should be a much smaller percent. So amount of change over the original, and notice that my wording is different here and here, but it really means the same thing. A $5 an hour raise divided by the original, which is 200, gives me 0.025, which is a 2.5% raise. The 50% raise shows that a $5 an hour raise is much bigger when compared to the starting value of $10 an hour. The $5 an hour raise is smaller when compared to the starting value of $200 an hour. And finally, we're using subtraction and division as a way to compare, which is something that we did early in the term as well. So subtraction and division are both ways to compare using math.